Truth be told, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan was a story that had been unfolding for years and has only recently begun attracting regional attention. But now, the massive lead contamination of the city's drinking water is very much on the national radar. Children in Flint now have double and in some cases triple the levels of lead in their blood, and a federal emergency was declared last weekend. Today in Detroit, President Obama addressed the troubles in Flint.
I know that if I was a parent up there, I would be beside myself that my kid's health could be at risk. It is a reminder of why you can't shortchange basic services that we provide to our people and that we together provide as a government to make sure that public health and safety is preserved.
In fact, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder has apologized and pledged to take new steps to protect the community. Snyder himself is under increasing pressure to detail what his administration knew and when. And in Flint, there's plenty of anger and question over who's to blame. The NewsHour's William Brangham is just back from Flint with this report.
This is how bad it's gotten.
A case of water for this house. Did she get a filter?
In Flint, Michigan, the sheriff's department is going door to door, handing out bottled water and filters. Fire stations are now water distribution centers. The National Guard's been deployed. And last night in his State of the State address, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder had to apologize.
To you, the people of Flint, I say tonight, as I have before, I am sorry and I will fix it.
Why? Because for a year and a half, despite repeated claims from officials that everything was fine, people in Flint were drinking water poisoned with lead, a toxin that causes irreversible damage to the human body.
It's every kid on the block. It's every baby on the block. It's everybody, every old person.
One of Kim Strebe's two sons, like potentially thousands of other kids in Flint, has elevated levels of lead in his blood.
I was absolutely disgusted to think that we are paying an enormous price for water that is dangerous, that we can't use.
The crisis began 5 years ago because the city of Flint was trying to save money. This majority black city has been in an economic tailspin for decades, ever since General Motors cut production here. 40% of Flint's 100,000 residents live in poverty. In 2011, Governor Rick Snyder turned near total control of Flint over to a series of emergency managers. They began major cost cutting, including a decision to try and save $5 million by switching Flint's water supply. Officials decided they wanted to get their water from Lake Huron, which is 80 miles to the east of us. But that pipeline wasn't going to be finished for 2 more years. And so in the interim, they decided they were going to get their water from right here, from the Flint River. But as soon as the river water began flowing into Flint in April of 2014, red flags popped up. The water smelled bad, and it flowed in a startling array of colors. E. coli and other bacteria were discovered, followed by chemicals that can cause liver and kidney problems. In the fall of 2014, the local GM plant stopped using Flint water because it was corroding their auto parts.
I mean, you can see it's particulates in it. See it floating?
Yep.
See the brown stuff's in it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's in my daughter's body.
Lifetime resident Rhonda Kelso, like thousands of other residents, soon discovered there was also poisonous lead in the water. The whole problem occurred because the Flint River corroded the city's old lead pipes, leaching the toxic metal into the water supply. Kelso's 12-year-old daughter, Kaylin, who's already developmentally delayed and hearing impaired, has now tested positive for lead in her blood.
They kept telling us something was safe, and it was revealed that it wasn't safe. We had to rely on outside agencies to let us know that the water was poison, and we already knew it was, but we had to prove it.
One of the people who helped prove it was one of Kaylin's doctors, Dr. Mona Hanna-Atisha. She's the director of the pediatric residency program at Hurley Medical Center in Flint.
When pediatricians hear anything about lead, we stand up straight and we freak out because we know lead. Lead is a potent, known, irreversible neurotoxin.
Late last summer, Dr. Hanna-Atisha tried to get county and state data on how much lead Flint's kids had been absorbing into their blood, but she hit roadblocks. So she then pulled data on roughly 1,700 kids from her own hospital and other local pediatricians.
We didn't sleep. We did this right away. This was the fastest research project I've ever done because of kind of the public health community implications. There was one neighborhood, one specific ward of the city where the percentage of lead poisoning actually tripled. It went from about 5% of kids to over almost 16% of kids who were tested who had elevated blood lead levels.
She released her findings at a news conference last September, but her data was dismissed by state health officials.
We were attacked. So we were told that we were unfortunate researchers, that we were unfortunate researchers, that we were causing near hysteria.
But 2 weeks later, officials acknowledged her findings were correct. And separately, researchers at Virginia Tech had also confirmed high levels of lead in Flint's water. This contamination could have been avoided if officials had only added an anti-corrosion agent to the water. In fact, federal law requires it, but they didn't do it in Flint, and no one has fully explained why.
It's something that no parent would accept. It's something that no city, county, or state government should accept, and there's no way it can be justified. Yes.
Dr. Lawrence Reynolds is a pediatrician and president of Mott Children's Health Center. He says lead causes a litany of problems for kids, among them delayed mental development, irritability, aggression, and learning problems.
If you've seen those IQ curves where, there's the big hump and the small tails, 5% on either end, what lead exposure does is it shifts the curve to the lower IQ score. So we will have more kids with lower IQ and perhaps more children who will have learning problems and require services. But then start multiplying these things by thousands and imagine what a school district has to deal with.
We're talking about a whole generation of 5 and under.
Newly elected Mayor Karen Weaver campaigned on fixing the water crisis, and shortly after taking office and with limited powers, she declared a state of emergency, trying to get her city some help.
People said that was something that couldn't be done, but I said that let them tell us no. Let them tell the people of Flint that we don't deserve these financial resources, these supports and these services for our families.
We don't live in third world conditions where we should have safe drinking water, and we don't.
Kim Streby's two sons are Ronan, who is 13, and Jude, who's 11. He's the one whose blood test came back with elevated lead levels. So you guys had been drinking it, cooking with it, brushing your teeth in it, taking baths in it, 100%?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when you found out that there was something wrong with that water, how did you feel about that?
I felt kind of scared, to know that I was using this water for pretty much everything, and then I found out that it could be dangerous.
I was kind of grossed out, because imagine you drinking water for a year and knowing that there's something that can be life-threatening.
As a parent, I couldn't imagine the feeling that for over a year and a half, my kids were drinking water that somebody should have known was poisonous.
Mm-hmm. There are no words. I don't know what to say. It's anger, frustration. And you wonder what's next.
At least 3 different class action lawsuits have now been filed, blaming local and state officials, even the governor, for negligence. Last night in Lansing, a crowd gathered outside the Capitol demanding Governor Snyder resign for his role in the crisis. Inside, Snyder focused his speech on Flint and pledged state officials would do all they could to fix the problem.
No citizen of this great state should endure this kind of catastrophe. Government failed you, federal, state, and local leaders, by breaking the trust you placed in us.
But those assurances aren't enough for Rhonda Kelso. She's signed on to one of those class action lawsuits.
Oh, they think that we're a permanent underclass, and they think that we're uneducated and ignorant, and that we are the most violent city in America, and people want to dispose of people like that.
Flint, as you know, is a majority black community. And when we look at who is exposed to lead around the country, those are also majority black communities.
Yes.
Do you think that that's part of what's also going on here?
Speaking to me as a person of color and as a resident of the city of Flint, I'll ask the other question. If this were Grand Blanc, Michigan, Bloomfield Hills, St. Joseph's, Michigan, which are mostly white, middle class, would we have had the same response if there was a water issue?
And what do you think?
There would have been a completely different response. It would have been a more timely response, and those complaints would have been taken as legitimate.
The city of Flint has stopped using the Flint River as its source, and corrosion control is now being used. People from across the United States have been donating tens of thousands of bottles of water, and more National Guard troops have arrived to help distribute them.
I love this city, and I love the people in the city, and it's a great city. And this water situation is just absolutely devastating to me, but it isn't the definition of the city.
Flint's better than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham in Flint, Michigan.